Hey everyone, welcome to today's watch review. We're going to be taking a good look at this Hublot Big Bang Unico in 42 millimeters. Now, I've got to say, this is not for everyone stylistically. This is a skeletonized in-house flyback chronograph from Hublot. And I've got to say, guys, I'm a fan. I think this is a really cool watch, but I recognize it won't be everyone's cup of tea, especially with the retail price of $18,800. But we're going to take a good look at this, the good, the bad, the details, and I'd like to thank Exquisite Timepieces. They're the Hublot authorized dealer that lent this in for presentation, and I've just had an awesome time with this watch, and I'd like to thank them. Great authorized dealer. Now let's start with some dimensions here. I'll place them on the screen and talk about it. The dimensions, they're not very straightforward. The watch is 42 millimeter, but the way we have these bump outs on the side, on the 9 o'clock side and on the crown side at the 3 o'clock position, it wears more substantial. And so I would say, although the dimensions indicate 46, I would classify this more like a 44 millimeter. And in fact, let me show you the watch I'm wearing today. This is the Speedmaster Professional from Omega, and you guys can see they're pretty close visually. This is 42. This one's technically 42, but it plays a bit bigger. And I think that's important to note when we're talking dimensions. The other thing, 14.7 in overall height or profile from the grade 5 titanium to the polished and brushed black ceramic of the bezel. So it's a fairly substantial watch when it comes to wrist presence and size. And the bracelet system or the strap system, I can't get a perfect measurement, but it's about 26 tapering down to 20 at the clasp. And let me demonstrate a pretty ingenious quick change system. You kind of push down, in this little area here on the case, and then you can remove the strap, and then you can just push it back into position. So it does have a quick change system that's pretty interesting. I like it. I never have a problem when there's an ingenious or well-engineered quick adjust system, and I think this Big Bang Unico from Hublot has it. But for me, the highlight of the show, the appeal, the draw, is all about this in-house 1280 Unico manufacture movement. So like I mentioned, this is a flyback chronograph. This carries a column wheel that you can see the actuation as we engage. That is so cool to look at. And I've got to say the pushers here, very easy. And there is no jump or stutter to the chronograph hand. Let me show you a pretty basic cam actuation system. When I engage my Speedmaster chronograph, notice the jump in the chronograph hand as we first begin it. You can see it almost jumps a 3/4 of a second. This is a pretty basic design when it comes to the chronograph, and I've got to say it's a night and day difference with the action, how smooth it is, seeing the actuation of the column wheel, seeing that there is no jump, there is no stutter, and everything resets with such a satisfaction when it comes to the tactile operation. And if you're unfamiliar with what a flyback is, let me demonstrate. It is a sign of a very sophisticated complication generally found in high-end or high horology pieces. But while the chronograph hand is running and keeping time, you can reset it, you can make it fly back right back to 0, and it continues with, or restarts with the elapsed timing. And you can do that as many times as you want to without damaging the movement in the slightest. It's really cool, really handy. And then it also operates like a normal chronograph with stopping, restarting, stopping, and a final reset without restarting the elapsed timer. So it's really cool. The other thing that I enjoy about this is the industrial look and feel, the architecture, how they're showing you this movement that carries almost 300 components. And you guys can see it's well put together, it's well designed, and it's well executed. I'll play some macro video here where you guys can see the details, the tolerances, how small some of these components are, and one of my favorite features, the skeletonized date wheel. It looks great. Now you can see it at the 3 o'clock position, but I will admit it is difficult to read at a glance. You almost have to squint sometimes to catch the day the date. Excuse me, I made a mistake there. The date. I would prefer if they would just enhance the contrast to a small degree so it's a little bit easier to read at a glance. But I'm nitpicking here. You have to nitpick when you're looking at a watch of this price point, nearly $20,000 full retail. And it begs the question, is it worth the money? I know there's going to be some people that go, you know what, I could never spend that much on an Hublot. I would rather spend that money on a Rolex and an Omega and a Breitling, buy gray market, and enhance my versatility with that amount of money. And I think, at first hearing that, it makes sense, right? You want to maximize the amount of watch bang for buck for every purchase that you have. But I have to remind myself that a watch of this caliber with the manufacturer Flyback skeletonized movement here with the grade 5 titanium, with the ceramic, with the history, with the name Hublot, and all that is associated with, the value shopper, the watch idiot savant, isn't necessarily Hublot's consumer base. The guys that have no problem spending $16,000 to $20,000 on a watch, they likely already have 5 to 10 Rolexes. They likely already have multiple Omegas, maybe a Patek, maybe an AP Royal Oak, maybe a Vacheron, an overseas chronograph. People that spend at this level, they spend money not as a value customer, but as someone that really likes the design, what it brings to the table, the type of emotional connection that they, ultimately begin and develop with the design. And so I got to remind myself of that as I talk about value and retail price. I'm not necessarily the target consumer here. It is geared toward the luxury enthusiast that maybe has a Maserati, maybe has a Ferrari, has multiple Rolexes, and is not new to this price tier, if that makes sense. Now let's go into the Lume shot here where I can show you the Superluminova Lume application. I like the industrial feel of the stencil style Arabics mixed in with the rectangular markers. And if you go in on a high level of magnification, you can see those appliques carry a little bit of texturing in the case of the indexes, and in the case of the Arabics, there is a bit of, how would you describe this? More of a sandblasted effect. It's not quite as linear with the striations as on the rectangular indices. And I like spending time with this watch under the loupe, looking at the printing of the logo on the sapphire crystal that carries the anti-reflective treatment, seeing the hint of sparkle and reflection in that paint. I like looking at the Swiss-made designation. I would say that Hublot, they do the Swiss-made designation probably the best in the business. At least it's my favorite because they kind of celebrate it in. They integrate it in with the design. It's not just crammed down by the 6 o'clock position on the bottom portion of the dial. It's evenly spaced. So it takes the real estate from the 5 o'clock marker to the 7 o'clock marker. I think it looks attractive. And I noticed that on the Fusion that I reviewed last year, the blue dialed 45mm titanium Fusion. That thing looks so good under the macro lens. One of the sharpest and cleanest dials that I've had the pleasure of filming over the years of presenting watches on YouTube. And I thought it was a great design feature, the way they executed that. I don't know of any other brand that really pays attention to the visual aesthetics of the Swiss-made. Hublot certainly does. Now, what negative elements would I say is associated with this watch? Let me see here. I would say the quick adjust system could be a little bit easier to operate when it comes to swapping out the rubber strap. If I wanted to put this on leather or a different option, it could be a little bit easier to operate. But I'm nitpicking, guys. I really like the detail work. I like the Lume. I like the design. the execution. And I could say that the design language, although currently it is quintessential Hublot, originally this really stemmed from the Royal Oak of 1972, the Gerald Genta designed AP Royal Oak. Now, it was designed after a ship's porthole, very industrial, very toolish, but still managing a nice level of finesse and sophistication. Hublot is taking that, and they've really taken that concept of the porthole, right? Hublot, the name, porthole, and they've went a little bit more industrial and less sophisticated, if that makes sense. And so if we look at these bezel bolts here and the ceramic bezel, if we go in on a higher level of magnification, you can see even the H cutout for the screw heads there. So there is a bit of repetition and vanity, and you'll find that throughout the skeletonized movement. They really celebrate the H form and factor, and I wonder if it's too much. You see it here on the crown, you see it on the counterbalance of the seconds hand, and you'll find it throughout. But I don't know, guys. I've got a nitpick here. There's no such thing as a perfect watch, and some will argue that this is an oversized, overpriced Invicta of the high horology scene. I think that's completely ridiculous. It's an oversimplification that I don't believe is accurate. Sure, the design language is industrial and loud and proud, but that is the intent. Hublot, they're very forward-thinking with what they bring to the table, with fusing different materials, the gold, the ceramic, the titanium, the colors that they operate, the sapphire cases. They're really about the show and the feeling, the experience. They're not about being thin and trim and elegant, fitting under a French cuff and going to a board meeting. These watches, I think, are made for a different type of clientele, and I can appreciate it and recognize at the same time that I'm not necessarily the target consumer audience, but I can appreciate the watch, its details, its level of comfort, the intricacies, and the experience of Hublot. And one of the negative elements that I found with my review last year of the Fusion is that they use the Solita-based movement, and they charge multiple thousands of dollars for essentially a pretty simplistic movement. And that's not the case here with this skeletonized manufacture, the Flyback with the column wheel. I don't think this suffers from the same negative elements, but there will be some that complain of the retail price. I think it's a pretty fun model. I really appreciate my time with this from Exquisite, so big thank you to Exquisite. And guys, if you're shopping Hublot, if you're shopping Omega, if you're shopping Oris, if you're shopping the host of brands that they carry, I will recommend my friend Nick. His contact information is in the description. He can get you aggressive pricing, good customer service, and is well worth a phone call, an email, or a text if you're in the market for something cool and interesting like this. So guys, even if this isn't your cup of tea, I want to thank you for being here during the review, during the presentation. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Thanks for watching today, and I'll catch you in the next video.